Welcome to the 5th of our soil testing series, where we'll look at soil texture. Soil texture is the feel of the soil. Some soils are sticky, and some won't stick together at all. Others feel doughy, or some are spongy. And some soils can be played with like plasticine. It's these differences in properties that has resulted in soils being called clays, loams or sands. Soil texture is determined by the proportion of sand, silt and clay particles. Clay particles are the smallest and have a flat surface. They have a negative charge which allow them to bind to water and other nutrients. Sand particles are the largest. They're often coarse and very resistant to weathering. Silt particles are sized in between the sand and the clays. Soil texture influences other soil properties such as water holding capacity, porosity, permeability, ability to hold and retain nutrients and to soil organic carbon, as well as how the soil behaves in water. The sand fraction in the soil allows the soil to drain, and the silt improves the water holding capacity. Sandy soils are limited in their capacity to increase significant amounts of soil organic carbon, as the coarse texture of the sand readily exposes the soil organic matter to breakdown by the soil biological organisms. The clay fraction is perhaps the most important, as it enables the soil to hold water and nutrients, and it influences the soil's ability to retain soil organic matter and build soil organic carbon, as the clay particles bind together. Now it's time to get our hands dirty and make mud pies. Well, kind of. Using the flow chart in the Soil Health Guide, we're going to estimate the texture of the topsoil and subsoil and see if we can note a texture change or not as we move down the profile. Take a small handful of soil from the top 10 centimetres at the side of the hole of your selected paddock and one from around 20 or 30 centimetres depth. It's important to remove any gravel, stone or organic matter bits which will make our job much easier. Add water drop by drop or spray by spray to the soil and knead it together and break down those aggregates. The soil has reached its proper consistency when it's plastic and mouldable like a moist putty. Now we're just going to follow that flow chart. Firstly, does the soil stick together? Well, it's a loamy sand. If yes, keep going. Make a ball with the soil and gently push the soil together and make a ribbon. Does it ribbon? No? Well, it's a sand. If yes, now it's time to roll. Does it roll? No? Well, it's a sandy loam or a loam, depending on if you can feel or hear that sand in the soil. If yes, bend the ribbon and does it crack? No? Well, check for sand and it's either a clay or a sandy clay. If it cracks, then check for sand again or a smoothness, and it's either a sandy clay loam or a clay loam, or if it feels smooth and silty and talcumy, then it's a silty clay loam. Now repeat that for the deeper sample. The change or lack of change of texture down the soil profile is important in understanding how water, plant roots and nutrients will move and be retained in the soil profile. Soils typically increase with clay moving down the soil profile. That's due to the small and mobile particle sizes of the clay. Ideally, this change is gradual. However, often this is not the case, with an abrupt change from a lighter soil, such as a loam in the topsoil, and a clay in the subsoil. This reduces the water, root, and nutrient penetration. Some soils will also have no texture change down the profile. Using the Soil Health Scorecard, we can assess if soil texture is poor. The soil texture abruptly changes from that topsoil like a sandy loam, to the subsoil, example a clay, and it gets a score of 1. Fair? The soil texture is about the same throughout the profile. It gets a score of 2. Or is it good? The soil texture gradually becomes heavier with more clay coming down the profile. Example, going from a loam to a clay loam, and that gets a score of 3. We can see that soil texture has a weighting of 1, this keeping the score as is, indicating that this soil health factor is not influenced by decisions we can make as land managers, with the exception where clay is added or moved down the soil, and that's called spreading or delving.